Coming up on Market to Market, USDA moves slowly on the Midwestern Palmer amaranth threat. Violent spring weather sweeps across the nation. And a place where one-stop shopping connects growers and buyers. Those stories and market analysis with Angie Setzer next.
Pretty reasonable bug food.
Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. This is the Friday, April 7 edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Mike Pearson. The American demand for another electronic device temporarily waned as fewer cell phones made their way across the Pacific. The U.S. trade deficit fell nearly 10% in February, fueled by a record drop in Chinese imports. And despite creating a meager 98,000 jobs last month, the unemployment rate fell to 4.5%, the lowest in nearly a decade. Congress has departed for a 2-week recess, leaving a vacancy at the top of the USDA in its wake. Upon return, they'll also face a vote to keep the government open. The White House directed the USDA to loosen restrictions on thousands of CRP acres to help ranchers in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas following massive wildfires. However, fast action by the department remained absent as the potential threat of Palmer amaranth continues to loom over row crop producers. Colleen Bradford-Krantz has the details.
A market-to-market investigation shows that USDA knew in early August of 2016 that seeds distributed in some parts of the Midwest likely accelerated the arrival of a costly southern weed. Despite the warning, federal officials were still drafting a letter for all of the potentially affected landowners months later. Some state-level agriculture officials and media outlets, including this program, were spreading the word that Palmer amaranth, a type of pigweed, had accidentally been included in native plant seed blends used to sow Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP ground. According to USDA emails obtained by Market to Market under the Freedom of Information Act, federal officials were still working on a national bulletin and letter for participants in CRP, pollinator, and wildlife planting programs as of late February. Iowa State University scientists began to suspect and publicize the problem last summer, when the number of Iowa counties with the yield-sapping weed suddenly increased from 5 to 48. Illinois and Minnesota discovered the same problem, but in far fewer counties. University weed scientists in Iowa, Minnesota, and Illinois decided early on to spread the word. They were concerned any delay would prevent farmers from having a chance to pull and burn the weeds before they went to seed. University scientists believe Midwest suppliers, facing unusually high demand, purchased some of their seeds from sources in Texas and Kansas, where Palmer is common. A Minnesota company that sold seed used on Palmer-infested CRP grounds was fined $4,000 this week for violating state seed laws. While debate took place in Washington, D.C. over what to do, a small soil and water conservation district office in Clark County, Illinois, took less than 10 days to inform growers in their area that a potential problem existed and asked farmers to check for the weed. The letter, dated August 9th, said, "Last week we were made aware of established Palmer amaranth growing in several CRP fields that were planted with seed purchased from us. There have been a lot of rumors over the past few days. However, we want you to know we are looking into the matter." The Commissioner of Agriculture in the state of Minnesota declared an eradication emergency and teamed up with the Twin Cities branch of USDA in late November. The two agencies crafted and sent a letter to just those Minnesota landholders potentially affected by the problem. Landowners in a few Iowa counties also received notification from USDA.
I think where we really missed out was not notifying landowners in August or September. By the end of August, it was very clear that contaminated seed mixes were the problems in the smaller contracts of 3 or 4 acres, it would not have taken that much time to walk those fields and remove the Palmer amaranth.
Palmer amaranth, also known as careless weed, can produce hundreds of thousands of seeds per plant. Some strains of palmer found in southern states have developed herbicide resistance, forcing farmers to spend up to $30 more per acre to hire crews to pull the weed. The 351 pages of emails and attached documents obtained by Market to Market do show that many USDA officials took the problem seriously. One USDA entomologist wrote, "These introductions could be especially problematic if the plants are found to be tolerant to glyphosate and/or other herbicides." And nearly 4 months later, an NRCS agronomist wrote, "The issue is that the weed, Palmer amaranth, which is very prolific and very dangerous for cropland production, actually an invasive species in Minnesota, has been coming up on CRP pollinator plantings as well as EQIP pollinator plantings." Another NRCS official expressed frustration with his government peers in the Office of Pest Management Policy. OPMP seems to be on the rampage on this issue, with some merit, but we really need to see some proof that the Palmer amaranth was in the native seed mixes. The same official expressed concerns early on that pollinator programs could be harmed if farmers believed the weed was spreading through seed blends before the source was indisputable. First is that Palmer amaranth is not a state noxious weed in many states, so there are no restrictions on it. Second is that seed labs which test for germination, purity, and weed seed can't distinguish the Palmer amaranth from other amaranth species. Minnesota added the weed to its list in 2014, and Iowa's legislature has a bill pending that would do the same. The same NRCS official, in an apparent reference to Iowa State University weed scientist Bob Hartzler, wrote on August 8, 2016, "I have concern with Iowa News release of their certainty that Palmer amaranth came in with contaminated seed sources, and any alarm that might create with farmers considering planting pollinator habitat."
We heard from some of the local offices that they had been told not to preemptively tell people to go out and look for Palmer amaranth. And so that was very frustrating because we knew that if we dealt with the issue during 2016, we could prevent those plants from going to seed and greatly simplify eradicating the Palmer amaranth.
Hartzler said federal officials are considering exceptions to the herbicide spraying bans that CRP landowners face. For Market to Market, I'm Colleen Bradford Krantz.
Mother Nature sent a message of her own to Washington, D.C., dragging 2 tornadoes through the area. Farther west, grain belt farmers are champing at the bit for opening day as heavy weather closes in. Paul Yeager has the story.
The weather pattern flipped to active this week across much of the country. A mix of tornadoes and high winds damaged homes and farmsteads across Georgia and South Carolina. This round was the second of the week in the South and produced at least 7 twisters in just the Peach State. Other touchdowns occurred in South Carolina and Indiana. A tornado also ripped through the southwestern Missouri town of Goodman, tearing off the roofs of the fire station and school while packing 120-mile-per-hour winds. Much of the equipment in the Corn Belt sat idle, waiting for the rains to stop. Next week, the USDA will begin issuing planting progress reports for both corn and soybeans. But only a handful of states have experienced ideal conditions to allow for field work, let alone planting. For Market to Market, I'm Paul Yeager.
Anyone in business will tell you it's all about relationships, but just making a connection can be a task in itself. However, Valley PBS producer Randy Reed found a place where grower and buyer forged valuable bonds in California's fertile Central Valley.
For 6 years, the organizers of the Fresno Food Expo have brought hundreds of domestic and international buyers together to explore the new food and beverage offerings produced by those who call California's bountiful Central Valley home. The 2016 edition of the Food Expo brought more than 950 buyers to the Golden State. Billing itself as the largest regional food show of its kind in the United States, buyers appreciate the size and scale of the event.
Well, you can see the companies that are more organized and have a marketing strategy or marketing plan. You can see the differentiation and taste the products. But I think the main component of this show is that you meet the owners and the ones who are actually doing things. In some other shows or some other regions, you talk to probably a bigger corporation, but here you can see people that actually own and do things. So it's easier to take decisions and make plans and establish long-term relationships.
I love coming here to look at emerging trends. And when you look at the San Joaquin Valley, it's such an epic center for manufacturing, and all the big growers are here. I'm specifically looking for trends in organic foods and to see if we can merge some of the small artisan food entrepreneurs to the larger scale folks and then create maybe healthier food options. So that's what I'm mostly looking for.
More than 130 local food and beverage companies displayed products at this year's show. Every signed contract will help boost the Golden State's agricultural sales numbers well over the $47 billion mark set in 2015. Among the companies in the exhibit hall was the family-owned Garrowin Farms, the largest grower of peaches, plums, and nectarines in the United States.
The Valley is very unique, and the Valley offers a lot more than I think people really understand, from fresh to finished. So we get buyers that come in that learn more about our company and our brand and our family. They can try and taste our products, but then they're also able to come in and learn more about some of these smaller companies, these up-and-coming companies that have some great innovative ideas that they're trying to get out into the national marketplace.
Garrowin Farms was already a successful exporter before it began exhibiting its products at the show, shipping its goods to Canada and Mexico. But many of the companies gain valuable experience as they learn what it takes to expand sales beyond their local markets. To assist exhibitors in bridging that business knowledge gap, organizers of the show partnered with agencies like the 13-state Western United States Agricultural Trade Association and the California Center for International Trade Development.
We provide an export training program, so we help the companies come in and then help them through the A through Z, kind of technicalities of exporting. So if they don't know where to go, if they need to do an export assessment, if they need export training, if they're looking for foreign buyers, or they're contacted by a foreign buyer that they've never heard of and they want to do a screening. So we are considered kind of a one-stop shop before you go into a foreign market.
In addition to training, these agencies leverage the matchmaking opportunities of the Fresno Food Expo by putting buyers in direct contact with producers attending the show.
Bringing the buyers here gives them, several different views of how the product is used. So, they're able to go directly to the grower, directly to the food processor, and then talk to them about how to be able to get their product into their country.
Some growers with experience in foreign trade boil expansion down to one key factor: consistency. Vincent Ricciuti, president of the Enzo Olive Oil Company, came to this conclusion on his way to breaking into Canadian and Japanese markets after only 6 years of production.
So the first thing that we did was we made sure that the quality of our product was the best. We really focused on, everything from the field to the manufacturing to the storage and the shipping, making sure that the control path was perfect, and wanted to make sure that, at every stage we had great attention to detail. My advice to anyone would be to make sure that you make the best product possible, and that's something that we really strive to do every single day.
Many of the exhibitors who have focused on this one business practice have seen their annual sales increase after participating in the Fresno Food Expo. Plans for the next show are already underway, and organizers are looking forward to helping Central Valley producers grow a few more opportunities into a larger piece of the marketplace. For Market to Market, I'm Paul Yeager.
Next, the Market to Market report.
Inclement weather in South America and good export demand failed to give the grain markets any momentum. For the week, May wheat lost 2 cents and the nearby corn contract fell a nickel. Rain in Argentina did little to move the soy complex as the May contract declined 4 cents. May meal dropped $1 per ton. In the softs, May cotton shrank $3.87 per hundredweight. Over in the dairy parlor, May Class 3 milk futures soured 67 cents. The livestock sector returned to mixed conditions as the June cattle contract expanded 92 cents, May feeders added $1.17, and the June lean hog contract shed $1.08. In the currency markets, the U.S. dollar index gained 89 basis points. Crude oil moved $1.64 per barrel higher. COMEX gold gained $6.10 per ounce. And the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index moved more than 5 basis points to finish the week at 393.95. Here now to lend us her insight on these and other trends is one of our regular market analysts, Angie Setzer. Angie, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, you can listen to our market discussion anytime by downloading our market analysis podcast on our website, iptv.org/MTOM. Angie, let's talk about the wheat market. We did get some export news this week.
Yeah.
Anything to move us dramatically higher?
No, I mean, the only good part is right now is like we talked the last time I was on the show, is the bearish surprises are basically gone. Now we're waiting to see if there's going to be anything that develops from a bullish standpoint. The crop itself is ahead, or it has been ahead, in the southern plains and in the delta. The hard part is all of the rain that's fallen in the areas that were dry has been a godsend for most guys, and is telling the trader, let's just sit and be calm here for a little bit and see what happens. There's really no area of concern, I would say, from a production standpoint at this point, but we're still a long way from having that crop ready to be harvested and in the bin.
Yeah, I was in central Kansas this week with our friends from Smoky Hills Public Television, and they'd had 5 inches of rain across so much of Kansas in the past 10 days. The wheat looked phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Bright green, growing like crazy. And I said, you know, the only bad news in the wheat market is that there's no good news.
That's just it. And wheat is the cockroach of the grain world.
Okay.
And so it takes so much to kill it. And that's where we're at is you know, that ahead of that rain, there was some real concern that there would be some drought issues. And there were. I mean, you saw Kansas down 1 million acres in plantings. Unfortunately, they're also up significantly in stocks, so they have some room to lose production. But the stuff that didn't come up last fall, which there were some of those, so there was some that was reported as planting that will likely still be abandoned, even though the stuff that had gotten a foothold ahead of winter looks great. There will be probably some further reduction, perhaps some more abandonment, especially if prices don't do anything between now and the end of the month.
Okay, might see some more going to grazing or baling, something like that.
Very possible, yeah.
All right, but as it sits today, no reason to get too excited here heading into April.
At this point right now, no, but there's no reason to be sad either. I mean,
Okay.
we'll probably just sit here and tread water for a while until something shows up in the weather pattern to indicate perhaps a scare either here, Europe, Russia, you know, and we all know going through the year now, the Australian outlook is a significant production cut there. So the low prices are starting to do their job. Unfortunately, it just takes some time. And then we've got to work through China. I mean, China, from a global stocks perspective, China's sitting on 48% of the world's wheat, and they're importing wheat, and they're having a hard time selling their wheat. So anyone who's stored wheat in the past can tell you it's not the easiest thing. And I really don't think the Chinese people are going to enjoy if their wheat is loaded with bugs. They don't seem to think it's extra protein.
Oh, right. It's tough to sell that in the marketing
definitely
packages.
is.
Well, now let's look at the corn market. We've got this new crop, let's talk old crop corn. How should farmers be handling that as we look out over this next month? We're getting concerned about cash flow. Do you make the sale and re-own it on the board?
I think you're going to have to look at some of that. In Michigan, we're lucky in Michigan. My trade territory, we're one of the few states that actually has less corn on hand as of March 1st than last year.
Yeah.
But for the rest of the states in the grain belt, unfortunately, everyone has more corn than a year ago. Right now, we have seen a significant slowdown in farmer selling. We are starting to see some ethanol plants get a little antsy about ownership because they know that there's only a matter of time before guys are going into the field. And so I always tell a farmer that the best time to try to negotiate a basis contract or something of that nature is when your buyer's feeling lonely. And buyers are feeling lonely right now. So there isn't anything wrong with going out and looking at perhaps locking in basis or selling the cash and re-owning. Calls are very cheap right now. So there are certain things that you could do on that sense. And sometimes it's best to move when others aren't. And it's especially important to pay attention to what your local market, you just had a grain stocks number come out. Take a look at where you're sitting, how many on-farm stocks are in your state in particular. Take a look at what your demand looks like and have a candid conversation with your buyer about what they're anticipating. And if your buyer's any good, he or she will flat out tell you what their thought process is going into the summer months here from a basis standpoint. And it doesn't hurt to get a feel for what you're looking at as you move ahead.
You bet. Now, over the past 10 days, we have seen phenomenal amounts of rain, and we've got a question from one of our viewers, Paul in Iowa. He's on Twitter at Northeast Iowa Farmer. He wants to know, how wet does it have to be for price to respond? When do we start getting worried about planting delays?
I don't think we get worried about planting delays until Mother's Day. And I know that seems late, and I'm not going to say that doesn't mean that it'll impact production. The last couple of years, especially here in Iowa, we've been planting by mid-April, and relatively at a blistering pace by mid-April, and the crop's been established, and we've been into May and on our way. The hardest part is the market really struggles with too wet, because the rain makes grain thought process. But if we get into the end of this month, into the end of April, and see a continuation of the wet weather pattern, which the forecasts that I'm looking at indicate that is going to be the case, and we start to get to May 1st here and perhaps see a similar pattern continue, then we will start to discuss the idea of switching out corn acres, especially if the market stays relatively flat.
Okay, and switching out corn acres, going to beans. The bean market, Angie Setzer, we finished the week with looked like we'd found a little stability.
Yeah.
Is the worst over in the near term on both old and new crop beans?
I think so in the near term, yes. I think we've factored in, we know the Brazilian crop is there. The one thing that we have is uncertainty about the Argentina crop. But to me, I cannot get too shook up about that, because the Brazilian crop at this point, the estimates that we're hearing, have an additional 4 to 5 million metric ton of beans that could be coming out of Brazil versus what the USDA is saying. I'm not saying that's legit. I'm not saying that's going to show up. I'm just telling you what the trade is talking about right now. The thing with Brazil, though, is that the farmer is not in a hurry to sell. And as an exporter, you can't sell what you don't own. So we have seen a continuation. Old crop soybean sales right now are 100% of USDA expectations. We need to see a continuation of shipping and no cancellations in those to get excited or even see a continuation of sales pace. New crop export sales have actually picked up significantly over the last 3 weeks. So something's telling me that the Brazilian seller is not in a hurry to sell into that Chinese market. And there is some discussion that the Chinese demand could be underestimated, which is shocking when you look at what their demand currently is.
Right.
To me, those are all things that will lend support to the market, that we don't have the crop in the ground. We don't really know what the weather's going to look like the next 4 weeks, as much as we want to think we do. So we have no idea what we're actually going to produce in the U.S., and we have no idea what our competitors to the south are going to put into the global pipeline going forward. Those unknowns in and of themselves should keep beans relatively supported, but very boring.
Okay.
I just don't see anything in the bean trade that would indicate you need to get out a party hat at this point.
We're not going to light a fire under anything anytime soon.
Not yet, and we don't really want to, because we don't want to encourage that Brazilian farmer to be selling into the market.
Let him hold. Let's capture these export markets while we can. Now, the livestock markets, Angie Setzer, let's talk live and feeder cattle. Yeah. We've had strength. That strength continued on through this week. When are you going to start getting nervous? When should guys really be putting some hedges on?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at putting on hedges. I mean, right now we're at a support level in live cattle on your nearby months. So we have went up. We had a big rally with the Brazilian story. Yep. Unfortunately, it took China 14 years to pull their ban on U.S. beef because of BSE, and about 4 days to pull their ban on Brazilian beef because of, the story, which surprised me. I thought we might see a little bit of time in that, but there is some indication still that Brazil is kind of hurting from that, and that the U.S. may pick up some of your more premium markets. Okay. Right now, we have seen a bit of a slowdown, or we thought we would see a bit of a slowdown in the cash prices. We're not really seeing much. This week's online auction didn't produce any results. The Superior auction didn't produce any results, but the packers have kind of done this deal that we've seen before, where they'll bid, buy up their needs for a couple weeks or so, and then completely remove themselves from the market to try and reset cash. Yeah. And so the question is now, is the supply out there that has to make it, or can the sellers kind of stand on their offers and wait to see if the market comes to them?
Without putting too much weight back on these animals.
Exactly. And so we've seen slaughter. Slaughter is still at incredibly high levels, maybe not compared to a week ago, but compared to a year ago.
Yeah.
So we've seen that. We have lost some supply of cattle due to weather and unfortunately the wildfires to the south. So that is something that will keep the local market strong. But from a seller standpoint, if there's profit, I think the one thing the cattle market's taught anyone over the last year and a half, 2 years, or 10 years, depending on how long you've been doing it, if there's profit to be had, make sure you take some of it and be happy with it.
Yeah. Now, the feeder cattle market, as long as the cattle feeder is making money, he's going to continue to bid up for those feeder calves. Is that your anticipation?
We see the feeder calves stay strong. I thought we would see them actually weaken, but it seems as though the market is still there and people want to bring them in and get them fat.
Perfect. Now, Angie, before we let you go, lean hog's going to be up or down on this next week?
We're going into Easter, so hopefully we can get some excitement on that side and everyone will go to buy their Easter ham. But overall, am I phoning it in if I say I think we'll basically go back and forth and probably settle close to unchanged? Because I just don't see any need for the hog market to really do much of anything.
Perfect. Angie Setzer, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
That wraps up the broadcast portion of Market to Market, but Angie and I will keep the conversation going, including answering more of your questions during Market Plus, available on our website. While you're there, check out the Classroom. This virtual schoolroom allows you to explore the science, technology, and business of agriculture. And join us again next week when we'll examine how butchers in rural America are working to stay a cut above the rest. So until then, thanks for watching. I'm Mike Pearson. Have a great week.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com.